do you guys consider yourself red pill manosphere? Like, where do you like? Do you consider yourself a part of it also?
So me being essentially some people in the comments seem the Joe Rogan of the Manosphere. Who even knows what the Manosphere even is? There's the producer of Louis Theroux's documentaries had a meeting with me just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we were talking about like what the Manosphere actually is. Manosphere is about men, but in the media, it's about heterosexual men. Aren't gay men part of the manosphere? They're men. So why are they excluded from it? Not to say that yeah, I think it's used in kind of like with bad intent when it's especially in media context. But yeah, I wouldn't parade around saying, hey, I'm a manosphere person, but if someone wants to label me as a manosphere person because I'm a man, then I suppose that makes me a manosphere person. But essentially having built Game Global, people see me as um the person who filled the vacuum of the community, the pickup community, and the person who made that happen has to be associated with the manosphere in some way if they feel like that. But to be honest, I don't really care. It's a label. Whatever it has to do with me, maybe I could be a good example because I'm a married man. If you want to run game, run pickup artistry for your end goal, and that end goal is marriage and having a family, that's a great end goal to have. And I'm an example of that. So let me be a good example if I may.
Okay. And so
I
what do
wouldn't.
you yeah, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
No, I wouldn't consider myself as someone who is part of the manosphere category or the red pill. And that has to do with my scientific studies I've done in the area of relationship building. And within the relationship building, attraction is a big part of it. And when we
Mm,
look at the scientific data in that field, there is nothing I've seen in the manosphere community or in the red pill community that actually have real scientific backing. And now we're talking about things that have been studying uh, Ivy League school have been studying this one for also since 1950s, interpersonal communication and relationship building. We have solid scientific data of how that works. And I have seen nothing like that in the manosphere, red pill community or the pickup artist community as well. So I cannot really take ideas that are not really scientifically proven and
mhm.
principles that are not proven either. So that's my response to that question.
Okay. So I guess how are your beliefs different than what they believe in terms of like what women want, what is attraction?
Okay, so if we're going to look at what attraction actually is, it is actually neurotransmitters that get released in the brain, both in females and males.
Hmm.
But in the route to get them released are different between men and women. You see? So there have been a lot of research made in this topic, and specifically now in the later years, we have been able to use neural imaging, also functional MRIs and so on, to really measure the release of neurotransmitters, to really determine that the theories that have been studying since 1950s is actually valid today. And what we have seen now, for example, is that when men are seeing beautiful women, their brain releases strong amount of neurotransmitters strongly connected with attraction, sexual attraction, bonding, and love itself. We're now talking about dopamine, endorphins, serotonin, and oxytocin. They did the same study with women. And what do you think they saw in the neural imaging? Nothing. Almost nothing happened when women saw beautiful men.
Okay.
Also, when they saw men, they also experimented. They wanted to make it more complex. So they actually put men in powerful positions. Like men that were not only handsome, but they look like they are in a high status area, such as
Hmm.
work, for example, like they are a doctor, they are someone who has been successful in the business industry and so on. And yet it didn't trigger them much. The only thing they saw was a small release of dopamine. And that was an indicator of interest only, that she might want to know more about him. But there was nothing like how men felt when they saw something attractive. It was just sick comparison, really.
Yeah.
So what is then my belief that we can do as men when it comes to attraction? Well, we have to look at what element actually triggered attraction in women, the real elements. And there is another study that have been made. A lot of studies have been made by universities all over the world, but Harvard made a very interesting study, Harvard University Cognitive Lab. So what they did was to measure the neurotransmitters release in female brains in communication. So they actually did it in two ways. One way was when women were listening to something very interesting, an interesting storyteller, an interesting joker like a comedian and so on. And what they saw in the female brain was a small release of dopamine, almost the same as what they saw in women when they saw beautiful men. Not so much happened there. But then they made vice versa. It's like we're asking the questions to women instead and let them talk about what they think about things and about themselves in depth. Mm-hmm. It was not until then when they saw a huge spike of neurotransmitters in the same way as what men saw when they saw beautiful women. So we could replicate that effect when women were talking about themselves, but have to be in a certain depth. It wasn't exactly as strong, but the exposure of those neurotransmitters was very stable and could even increase with time. So now we're getting somewhere when it comes to attraction. What actually triggers attraction in women? And that is very interesting. So the answer to your question is, that is what I believe in, because that is what we have been proven triggers attraction in women. In contrast to routine-based game or scripted game or something like that, where we're taking a lot of external factors to trigger attraction in women. It doesn't really work that way. We have to trigger attraction internally. And we're doing that with interpersonal communication.
Would you say that's another way to say that women like men that are charming?
Yeah. You could say that. You could say that. But when you look at charisma and being charming, it involves more than one-liner most of the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if we look at the charisma code and being charming and so on, it's much more about how a man can make a woman feel in conversations and interactions, rather than trying to say something funny, taking out of thin air. Absolutely. So that is what I believe is.
I believe that. I've seen men date women very out of their league looks wise, but they're funny or charming. I could see that. I could totally see that.
Absolutely. I mean, there is not so big difference. And now I think a lot of people from the red pill community is going to scream now. But there is not so big difference between being pretty average, dating women, and being someone who is pretty handsome and dating women. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about the homeless person living on the street here. We're talking about a pretty good, decent looking guy, comparing that with someone who's really handsome and who is being successful in something, compared with the average man with a pretty average job. The difference between those two can be huge if none of them know how to communicate with women. But if both of them could communicate with women, the difference between those two become like almost equal.
It's almost like a different... Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it's almost like a different language that you guys have to learn to talk to us, because...
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's what it's like. I notice in men that work in more, I guess, rough fields where they're not really around women, it's like a learning adjustment as they get older to like say things in a different way so we don't get offended, or it's more palatable, or we answer questions more, whatever.
Yeah, so here comes the tricky part, Pearl. Here comes the tricky part, is that in order to be able to communicate in this way that actually trigger the neurotransmitters in women, we have to take things in depth. And that is what communication skills comes in. And my main advisors are professors from universities in communication, basically, and people that work in professional fields and so on. And what we have seen here is that no one knows real empathetic communication skills unless they are schooled. So what happens when we have a bunch of men out there in the society that don't know how to communicate in a way that that triggers attraction in women. What happens then? Well, the attractionness level between men and women are completely unbalanced. And I remember you saying one time that, oh, women don't bring so much to the table in relationship, basically. So if we look at it objectively, yeah, you might be right. They don't do anything. They just exist, right? But if you're going to look at the brain and how the attraction and those neurotransmitters getting released, women being pretty, being attractive is enough for that kind of feeling in male brains.
Have you been to America? We're fat here. They're not pretty.
So
like the
I knew you had to
average
say something
female
like
like
that.
180.
So actually, on the most recent dating coach panel, there was one dating coach on there who said because he goes to a bunch of other countries, he probably hasn't had sex with an American woman for about 6 or 8 years. And then Michael Sartain said, "Good, you're absolved." It was just the funniest thing ever. Everyone was so happy about it.
Yeah, I've heard that.